The glove compartment opened with a sound Cole Merritt had memorized the way other boys memorize sports scores or song lyrics. A soft click, then the creak of the hinge, then the small resistance of the compartment door swinging down in the dark interior of a 2003 Honda Civic parked behind the old gymnasium building on the east edge of Riverside, Arizona. It was 2 in the morning. November had arrived without ceremony, the way November always does in the desert, not with dramatic cold, but with a dryness that settled into your sinuses and made your eyes feel like they had been left out overnight. Cole reached into the compartment and found the box by touch. Cardboard, lightweight, about the size of a hardcover book. He lifted it out and rested it on his knees and sat with it in the dark, the way another person might sit with a cup of coffee or a telephone call from someone they had not spoken to in too long. "Hey, Mom," he said quietly. Not out loud, not really. The words formed somewhere between his throat and his chest and never fully made it to his lips. That was fine. She would hear him the same way. "I had a good day today. HV, AC theory test came back. 87. Mr. Pell said it was the highest in the class. He told me I have good hands for the work." Good hands. Cole turned the box over, slowly feeling the slight shift of weight inside the way the contents settled against one side with a whisper of sound that he had stopped flinching at 3 months ago. "You always said I had your hands. The long fingers. Remember you used to call them piano hands, even though neither of us ever played." He sat with the box for another few minutes. Outside, the desert wind moved through the scrub brush at the edge of the parking lot, and a plastic bag caught in the chain-link fence rattled in a slow, irregular rhythm. Somewhere across town, a dog was barking at nothing. The stars over Riverside, Arizona were brilliant and enormous, the way stars get when there is no one left awake to notice them. Cole set the box back in the glove compartment with both hands, closed it carefully, reclined the driver's seat as far as it would go, which was not far enough, folded his 6 feet of height into the arrangement he had learned over 8 months of practice, left knee against the door, right leg angled toward the passenger seat, spine curved in a way that would announce itself loudly when morning came. He set his phone alarm for 5:45. He closed his eyes. He did not sleep for a long time. The morning began the same way every morning began. The alarm, the slow, violent unfolding of a body that had been compressed into a space designed for driving and nothing else. The neck, the lower back, the knees which sounded when he straightened them like someone crumpling a sheet of aluminum foil. He sat up and conducted the inventory that had become as automatic as breathing. Phone charged. Battery at 62%, enough. Backpack in the rear seat safety pin, holding the broken zipper pulled together because he had not yet found a replacement and because the pin worked fine and he had learned to stop spending energy on things that worked fine. Clothes for the day folded on the passenger seat, the gray shirt with the bleach stain near the left hem, the pair of dark jeans that still looked reasonable from a distance. Clean enough, he had done laundry at the coin machines at the Sunridge Apartments complex 2 days ago, feeding quarters into the machine with the focused attention of someone performing a ritual. Gas, he checked the gauge. A quarter tank, enough to get through today and tomorrow. He had $43 in the coffee can wedged under the passenger seat. Gas was $2.98 a gallon at the station on 5th. He did the math the way he always did the math, automatically, without pleasure, the arithmetic of getting through one more day. He drove to the McDonald's on 5th Street. The bathroom at the 5th Street McDonald's had a fluorescent light above the mirror that buzzed at a frequency designed, it seemed, to make every reflection look slightly worse than reality. Cole had been using this bathroom 3 mornings a week since March, and he knew the light and the buzz and the way the mirror was cracked in the lower right corner where someone had struck it at some point in the past. He knew the sound the paper towel dispenser made when it was empty. He knew which stall door did not latch properly. He knew all of it the way you know a place you have spent more mornings in than you can easily count. He brushed his teeth, washed his face with the pink institutional soap from the dispenser on the wall, checked his hair in the cracked mirror, too long now, curling at the ears, but not so long that it read as neglect rather than choice. He had been wearing it slightly longer for the past month, specifically because longer hair read as a preference, not a symptom. He had learned to think this way about everything: what reads as normal, what reads as fine, what reads as a kid who goes home at the end of the day. The man mopping the floors when Cole came in had never once spoken to him. Neither had Cole spoken to him. They existed in the same space 3 mornings a week in a kind of mutual and comfortable silence. Two people who understood that sometimes the kindest thing you can offer another person is the courtesy of not noticing them too hard. Cole bought a black coffee from the counter, $1.09. He drank it in the car on the way to Hargrove High School. Hargrove High was a public school on the northeast edge of Riverside with 1,400 students, a football team that had not had a winning season in 6 years, a drama department that was quietly excellent and never got any credit for it, and a parking lot that Cole had memorized the way a chess player memorizes the board. East Lot, West Lot, Teacher Lot Street, parking along the north side of campus, hospital, overflow lot 4 blocks east, the cracked blacktop behind the abandoned strip mall on Meridian that security never patrolled. He rotated, Monday east, Tuesday west, Wednesday street, parking on the north side. Thursday, he had learned to arrive early enough to tail a teacher with a lot pass and slip in before the gate closed. Friday east again. The rotation was not random. The rotation was a system designed around one central principle. No one should be able to look at the parking lot on any given day and say that car is always here. Because a car that is always there is noticed. And noticed meant questions. And questions were the only thing Cole Merritt could not afford. He arrived at school at 6:40 on Wednesday morning because the night before there had been voices at Harlan Voss's compound on Ridgeback Road carrying all the way across the desert quiet, and she had not slept. That was not Cole's story. That belonged to the girl in the leather jacket. But the two stories were approaching each other the way two rivers approach the same valley, each flowing from a different ridge, each carrying different water, each unaware of the other until the moment they meet. Cole arrived at 6:40 and parked in his Wednesday spot and sat with his coffee and watched the school building come awake. The maintenance crew arrived in their white truck, 2 men in work shirts with the Hargrove District logo on the chest carrying thermoses and moving with the deliberate, unhurried pace of men who had been doing this long enough to stop being impressed by it. They unlocked the side entrance on the east wing, and the lights in the main corridor began to come on one by one from left to right like a slow row of dominoes falling in reverse. Cole got his backpack from the rear seat and headed inside. He took the long route to his locker, which was out of the way, and added 3 minutes to his morning, but which took him past the gymnasium on the east end of the building. The gymnasium hallway was always empty at 6:40. Cole used it as a staging area, a quiet corridor where he could switch out his books without anyone watching, where he could check the reflection in the trophy case glass and confirm that the gray shirt and the dark jeans read as normal. Just a kid at his locker, not a kid who had been sleeping in a car since the end of February. He was switching his history textbook for his HVAC theory binder when he heard the shower running. The sound came from the boys' locker room, which had a fire door that never fully closed because the pneumatic hinge had been broken since September and nobody had fixed it yet. Cole glanced through the gap out of something that was more reflex than curiosity, the same way you glance at a car that brakes hard on the highway ahead of you, even when you are sure there is no danger. He saw a boy he knew by face and name, and nothing else standing in the far shower stall, the one with the broken latch using a small bottle of shampoo that came from a hotel, the kind of bottle that reads complimentary across the label in small print. The boy's backpack was sitting on the bench near the door with a Ziploc bag of toiletries balanced on top of it. Toothbrush, toothpaste, a disposable razor still in its packaging. Cole looked for exactly 3 seconds, then he walked away. He went to the parking lot and sat in his car and looked at the steering wheel and thought about what it felt like to shower at school because you could not shower anywhere else. He thought about the way the boy had held that small hotel shampoo bottle with both hands efficiently, without embarrassment, the way you handle something when you have stopped being surprised by its necessity. He thought about this for 20 minutes. Then he drove back to the school, parked, went inside, and did not tell a single person what he had seen. That was a Tuesday in the second week of November. His name was Cole Merritt. He was 17 years old. He had a mother's ashes in his glove compartment and an HVAC certificate 8 months away, and no address to put on any form that asked for one. He had been invisible since March, and he was good at it by now, the way you get good at anything you do every day without choice. And he had just decided in the parking lot of Hargrove High School on a Tuesday morning in November that the boy in the shower did not need to know someone had seen him. What he needed was for the knowledge to disappear. What he needed was for the world to look away and let him have his 3 seconds of privacy without it becoming a conversation or a report or a system that would pick him up and process him and spit him out somewhere worse. Cole understood this need. He understood it the way you understand water pressure or the weight of a stone. Not intellectually, in the body. He had already decided. He just did not know yet what he was going to do with that decision. Raylan Voss had two versions of herself, and she despised both of them. The first version existed at Hargrove High School. This version sat in the back corner of every room, wore the same black leather jacket, regardless of what the thermostat said, and maintained a silence so consistent and deliberate that most students had stopped interpreting it as hostility and had graduated to simply not registering her presence at all. This was exactly what she wanted. It was also exactly what she hated about wanting it. The second version existed at the compound on Ridgeback Road, 11 miles outside of town, where the driveway was lined with Harleys and the garage never fully closed, and men with road-worn vests came and went at hours that had nothing to do with the clock regular people used. This version was Harlan Voss's daughter, the president's kid. The girl who had grown up learning the sound of a Harley engine the way other girls learned the sound of their father's voices, and who had never once in 17 years been able to separate the two. Harlan Voss ran the Iron Saints MC the way weather systems run, without asking permission, without explaining themselves, with a certainty that the world would reorganize around them rather than the other way. He was a large man, 6'4" and built like he had been assembled from the materials of the landscape he rode through, rock and scrub, and something old and uncompromising that did not apologize for taking up space. His beard had gone gray at the edges, and he braided it at the ends with small silver clasps. His eyes were pale blue, almost gray, and they had a quality that made people feel simultaneously seen and measured, like being looked at through a very accurate instrument. Raylan loved her father the way you love a thunderstorm, with awe and fear, and the knowledge that no matter how beautiful it is from a distance, it can level everything you care about without meaning to. Her mother had known that too. Diane Voss had married Harlan when she was 22 years old. She had known exactly what she was marrying. She had loved him anyway, the way certain people love difficult things, not despite the difficulty, but because of what the difficulty revealed about the thing beneath it. She thought the love would be enough. She thought it would create space inside the club life, a room of their own inside the compound where Harlan could be just a husband and just a father, not the president, not the man everyone watched when he walked into a room. She was wrong. Harlan was not capable of being just anything. He was constitutionally, fundamentally incapable of leaving the president at the door when he came home. Not because he did not love his wife and his daughter, but because he had never learned to hold two things at once without one of them dropping. And the club was the thing that had been in his hands longest. By the time Rayalyn was 8, Diane had stopped asking Harlan to come to the school play on time. By the time Rayalyn was 9, Diane had stopped expecting him to be there at all. She still came. She still sat in the front row with her program in her lap and her camera in her hand and her smile that cost more every year to produce. She sat there alone and applauded and caught Raylan's eye across the auditorium and raised her thumb in the signal they had developed together, the signal that meant, "I see you. I am proud of you. You are doing so well." She left on a Tuesday morning in October when Raylan was 10. Raylan woke to the sound that she would never be able to unhear for the rest of her life. The sound of empty metal clothes hangers clicking together in the draft from an open closet door. She lay in her bed and listened to it for a moment before understanding what it meant. Then she got up and looked. The closet was empty, not a single garment remaining on the rod. Just the wire hangers swinging gently against each other in the air her mother's departure had disturbed. On the kitchen counter there was a folded piece of paper. Raylan still knew every word on it because she had read it so many times over 7 years that the paper had softened at the folds and the ink had faded at the edges. "I love you. I cannot do this anymore. Please forgive me." 3 sentences. Raylan had spent 3 years trying to decide if the third sentence was a request or a command. She had spent the 4 years after that trying to decide if it mattered. The note was folded in the inside pocket of her leather jacket right now. It was always there. She had never told her father about the note. He had his own version of what had happened, and it was close enough to the truth in most of the ways that mattered. What was not close enough was the part where he seemed to have decided that the fault lay somewhere in the general vicinity of the club life and the road and the Brotherhood, and not specifically precisely in the place where Harlan Voss had chosen the title over the man and never found a way to reconcile the difference. Raylan had never told him her interpretation. She had worn the leather jacket instead. She was wearing it on the Wednesday morning in the second week of November when she arrived at school at 6:40 because the voices at the compound had been going since before midnight, and she had finally stopped pretending she could sleep through them and gotten in her truck and driven. She was cutting through the gymnasium hallway on her way to her locker when she heard the shower running. She glanced through the gap in the fire door, the same way she always glanced reflexively without expectation. The way you look at something you have walked past so many times it has become invisible. What she saw stopped her. The boy in the far stall had his back to the door, brown hair that needed cutting, narrow shoulders taller than she had registered from classroom distances. His backpack was on the bench with a Ziploc bag sitting on top of it. The bag was neatly organized. Toothbrush in one corner, small tube of toothpaste, hotel shampoo. The hotel shampoo that came free with the room and was designed to be exactly enough for one shower. She looked for 3 seconds, then she walked away. She went to her truck in the parking lot and sat with the engine off and her hands on the steering wheel and thought about what she had just seen. She knew the boy. His name was Cole Merritt. He sat in the back corner of American History and HV, Ake Theory, which was one row up and three seats to the left of wherever she happened to be sitting. She knew his name from roll call. She knew he wore the same rotation of shirts, three of them, which she had cataloged without meaning to, because she had a habit of noticing things other people did not notice, a habit she had developed in childhood as a survival tool and had never been able to turn off. Three shirts, 5 school days. She sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes. Then she drove to the Rite Aid on Commerce Street and spent $14 on a bottle of shampoo, a new toothbrush still in its packaging, and a box of granola bars. She did not leave a note. She placed the items in the locker she had identified as Cole's, the one on the east end of the gymnasium hallway, way early enough the next morning that no one else was in the corridor. She put the items inside, closed the locker, and walked to first period. She told herself it was a one-time thing. She left more items the following week. Thick socks because she had noticed bare ankles above worn-out sneakers, and November mornings in Riverside were cold. Another granola bar, a travel-size bottle of ibuprofen because she had seen him pressing his hand against his lower back in a way that suggested someone who had been sleeping in a bad position for months. She told herself she did not know what it was that she was doing. She was lying. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was extending without words and without expectation of acknowledgement the kind of attention that she herself had needed for 7 years and had never received. She was seeing a person the world had decided not to see. She was leaving evidence of that seeing in the only form she knew how to manage, which was anonymous and practical, and required nothing in return. It was the closest she had come to friendship in 3 years. She was aware of how pathetic that was. She chose not to examine it too closely. Cole had been watching Raylan Voss for 3 weeks without her knowing it, and during those 3 weeks he had arrived at a number of conclusions that were inconvenient in their specificity. She rotated her parking spot, not on his scale but with the same underlying principle, never in the same location 2 days in a row, always in a spot that provided a clear line of sight to the main entrance, always positioned for an exit. She ate lunch alone, not in the cafeteria but in her truck, and she ate in a particular way, slowly, methodically, like someone who had learned not to assume the next meal was automatic. She knew where the security camera blind spots were. He had watched her navigate around them so naturally and so unconsciously that it was clear she had mapped the campus the same way he had, not for any specific purpose, but out of the general vigilance of a person who is always running a background calculation about where the exits are. He recognized all of these things because they were his own behaviors reflected back at him from a distance. He did not know what to do with this recognition. It felt dangerous in a way that was hard to name. Cole was feeding Atlas when he first noticed that something was wrong with Garrett Pruitt. Atlas was the orange tabby that had appeared behind the East Lot dumpster 3 weeks ago, with a torn ear and a dragging left hind leg, and the wary, unfocused eyes of an animal that had been hurt too many times to extend trust easily. Cole had torn off a piece of his cafeteria sandwich and left it on the pavement near the dumpster without approaching the cat, without speaking to it, without any expectation that the gesture would be received. The cat had waited until Cole moved away, then eaten the food with the fast, efficient attention of something that understood that resources were not guaranteed. The distance between them had decreased over 3 weeks, from 10 feet to 6 to 2 to now the cat pressing against Cole's leg while he sat on the bumper of his car and tore pieces from the Tuesday chicken they always served on Tuesdays. He had named the cat Atlas because on the first night they met, the constellation Orion had been brilliant overhead, and Atlas, which was the name of the star cluster nearby, seemed to fit better. And because Cole needed to believe in something that was larger than a parking lot, he was feeding Atlas when he saw Garrett Pruitt sitting in a silver Honda Accord in the far corner of the east lot. Far corner. The cameras did not quite reach that spot. Cole knew this. He had parked there himself on occasions when he needed to feel certain he was not being watched. Garrett was not on his phone, not eating, not doing anything that a 17-year-old does in a car during lunch period. He was just sitting engine running, staring at the school building, with a stillness that Cole recognized from somewhere deep in his own memory. Garrett Pruitt had been a football player at Hargrove until October. First-string linebacker, the kind of athlete that small towns build stories around, the kind of presence that makes a school feel briefly like it matters in a larger sense. Cole had seen him in the hallways last year and the year before, had registered him the way you register a weather system, large and in motion, and not something you needed to think about unless it was heading toward you. But that was last year. Garrett's father had been arrested in September for armed robbery at a convenience store in Flagstaff. The details had passed through the school the way those details always pass through a school, with the efficient cruelty of a system that has no actual interest in the pain it distributes. His girlfriend had posted text messages on Instagram, private messages, the kind you send when you trust someone. Cole had not read the messages. He did not need to. He understood from the architecture of what happened after the withdrawal, the silence, the way Garrett had stopped inhabiting his own size, what the messages must have contained. Garrett had quit the football team in October. He had quit talking somewhere around the same time. He still came to school. That was the thing that Cole could not stop thinking about. Garrett Pruitt still came to school every single day and sat in his seat and held himself together with whatever was left of the structure he had once built his life around. And Cole recognized this too, the act of showing up out of pure stubbornness, not because anything here is good, but because not showing up is the first step towards something irreversible. In HV, Ache theory, that morning Garrett had been tapping his pencil against the desk. Tap, tap, tap. A slow, deliberate rhythm like a metronome counting down to something that existed only in his own head. His eyes were focused on a point in the air in front of him, a point that had no physical referent. The kind of staring that happens when you have stopped processing the external world and started living entirely inside the one behind your eyes. When the instructor called his name, Garrett did not respond, did not flinch, did not move. Cole had told himself it was nothing. People zone out. People have bad days. People lose track of themselves in classrooms that cannot compete with whatever is happening inside their heads. He told himself this, and it did not stick. Because there was something behind Garrett's eyes that was not sadness, was not emptiness exactly. It was something more specific than emptiness. It was the look of a person who has already reached a conclusion and is now simply waiting for the circumstances to catch up with the decision they have made. Cole knew that look. He had seen it in the mirror in the first week after March. Before the car, before the system, before the routine that became his survival, before he had found his way back to the side of the ledger where you kept going. He watched Garrett's car from the east lot for 20 minutes. Then the engine revved and the Accord pulled out of the spot, too slowly moving across the lot with the careful deliberateness of something that does not want to attract attention, and turned onto the street and disappeared. Cole could not eat after that. Atlas meowed for the rest of the chicken, and Cole's hands were shaking too badly to tear the meat. And eventually the cat looked at him with the patient expression of an animal that has learned to accommodate human unreliability and sat down to wait. Cole sat on the bumper of his car and looked at the space where Garrett's car had been parked and thought about things he did not want to think about. There are days in a person's life when the ordinary machinery of the world continues running, even as something important has shifted beneath it. The lockers open and close. The bells ring on schedule. Teachers write on whiteboards. The vending machines in the third-floor hallway dispense the same snacks they have always dispensed. All of it continues with the indifferent persistence of systems that were not designed to notice the individual human units passing through them. Wednesday ended. Cole drove to his Wednesday spot parked behind the old gym building at the east edge of campus and tried to finish his history essay by the light of his phone. He had made it through the section on post-war economic expansion when the text arrived. Unknown number. No area code he recognized. He looked at it for a moment before opening it, not out of suspicion, but out of the general caution he applied to anything that arrived without identification. He lived his life in a condition of low-grade alertness that most 17-year-olds never had to develop the alertness of someone who understood that surprises were more often problems than gifts. He opened the message. It was a photograph, taken from above looking down into the open trunk of a car. The trunk was clean organized in a way that had its own terrible logic. A long rifle case, black with a padlock, the silver catch catching the light from whatever illuminated the trunk. 3 boxes of ammunition arranged in a row beside it. Winchester brand. The boxes were aligned with the same deliberate neatness that Garrett Pruitt had used when tapping his pencil on the desk. Below the photograph, a message appeared, letter by letter, in the way that messages appear when someone is typing in real time. I am sorry you have to see this. You were one of the good ones. Do not come to school tomorrow. Please. Cole read the message, then he read it again. His hands were shaking with an intensity that was different from the shaking at lunch. That had been the shaking of unease, of suspicion of something wrong sitting in his chest without yet having a name. This was different. This was the shaking of a body that had received information it did not want and could not process quickly enough to contain. He called the number. Dead. He tried again. Nothing. The number had existed for exactly as long as it needed to exist to deliver its message, and then it was gone the way certain things are gone. Cole looked at the photograph again. He looked at the rifle case and the ammunition and the silver padlock and the receipt tucked under one of the boxes at an angle that made it unreadable. He thought about Garrett Pruitt's eyes in HVAC theory that morning. The focused, unfocused stare, the pencil tapping, the car in the far corner of the east lot engine running, staring at the school building, with the stillness of a calculation already completed. He thought about the words. You were one of the good ones. Past tense. Past tense was the thing that would not leave him. Past tense was not a mistake. Past tense was a choice. Past tense was the grammar of someone who had already written the obituaries and was waiting for the funerals to catch up. Cole sat in his Wednesday spot behind the old gym and held his phone and thought about what to do. He thought about calling 911. He thought about what happened when a homeless 17-year-old called 911 and reported a threat based on an anonymous text and a photograph that could theoretically have been staged. He thought about the questions that would follow. Where do you live? What is your address? Who is your guardian? He thought about the officers who would respond with the professional thoroughness of people who did not know his situation, who would find out his situation, who would then have to do something about his situation. He thought about the word foster and the word system and the word housing, which in the context of being processed by the state did not mean what housing meant, when Cole used it in his own head to describe the room with walls and a door and a bed that he was 8 months away from being able to afford. He thought about Garrett Pruitt. He thought about the stillness, the conclusion. The terrible, completed certainty of a person who had made a decision that no one around him had recognized in time to interrupt. He pressed the numbers. 911. The operator answered on the second ring. Her voice was the specific calm of someone trained to be the steadiest sound in a room full of panic. This calmness was professional, deliberate, and in the moment Cole heard it, he was grateful for it in a way that went past gratitude into something closer to relief, the relief of hearing a voice that was not going to break. He told her everything. The text, the photograph, the rifle case, and the ammunition. Garrett Pruitt in HV, Ace Theory with the pencil tapping and the unfocused stare. The car in the east lot engine running, staring at the school. The way he had looked at the parking lot like it was already a target. The way his eyes had the quality of a conclusion rather than a feeling. He talked until his voice was raw and the words were tripping over each other, and the operator had asked him to slow down twice and repeat himself once. He talked because the only alternative to talking was staying silent, and staying silent was the thing that led to mornings where you found someone on the bathroom floor and there was nothing left to do but call a different number and wait for people to come and take everything away in bags. Two officers met him at the station 40 minutes later. They were professional. They photographed the text message. They took screenshots. They asked him about his relationship to Garrett Pruitt, about prior incidents, about any other evidence he might have noticed. They wrote everything down with the steady hand of people who understood that documentation was the first form of taking something seriously. One of them, a woman with reading glasses. She kept pushing up her nose and a wedding ring she kept turning with her thumb, looked at Cole when they were done and said, "You did the right thing. We will have the resource officer speak with him first thing in the morning. We take these seriously." The other officer, older, a gray mustache, and the deliberate movements of a man who has been doing this long enough to understand that thoroughness is a form of respect, handed Cole a card with his direct number. Then he paused. "You got somewhere safe to stay tonight." Cole looked at the officer's face. The question was asked with the straightforward concern of a man who had noticed something without being certain what he had noticed. Cole recognized the look. He had become fluent in that look. The look of someone who was about to understand something he would then be professionally obligated to address. "Yes, sir," Cole said. He said it the way he always said it, evenly, with the precise amount of certainty that read as true, without inviting follow-up questions. The lie that kept the architecture standing. He drove out of the station parking lot and parked across the street in the lot of the 24-hour diner on the corner. He did not sleep. Could not sleep. The photograph burned behind his closed eyes every time he tried. The rifle case, the padlock, the ammunition boxes aligned with terrible tidiness. The receipt tucked underneath at an unreadable angle. "You were one of the good ones." He lay with the driver's seat reclined and his hands folded on his chest and watched the ceiling of the car and thought about tomorrow. He thought about whether the police would reach Garrett before Garrett reached the conclusion he had already written. He thought about the word tomorrow and all the weight it carried, the ordinary terrible weight of a word that asked the world to still be the same shape when you woke up. At 5:30, he gave up. He drove to the McDonald's on 5th. The man mopping the floor was there, same as always, moving with the same steady, unhurried efficiency. Cole brushed his teeth and washed his face and checked the mirror. Dark circles deeper than usual. Hair that needed cutting. The bleach stain on the gray shirt covered by the angle of his backpack. He bought a coffee and drove to school. He parked in his Wednesday spot because Wednesday was Wednesday, and the rotation was the rotation, and the only way the system worked was if he did not vary it based on feelings. He sat in his car and watched the sun come up, orange and cold, over the roofline of Hargrove High School. Teachers arrived with their coffee cups, early students in parents' SUVs, the maintenance crew with their thermoses unlocking side doors, turning on lights. The ordinary machinery of a school morning grinding into motion as if the night before had not happened, as if the photograph had been a dream, as if the words past tense were just words. Cole watched every car that entered the lot. Check the make, check the color, check the driver, waiting for a silver Honda Accord. At 7:15, a police cruiser pulled into the lot. The resource officer, a stocky man named Briggs, who spent his days standing by the front entrance with his arms crossed and his face neutral, walked inside with the principal. Their heads were close together, the principal's hand on Briggs's shoulder. Something was happening. Something had been set into motion by Cole's phone call and was now moving through the official channels of an institution trying to manage a threat it had not yet confirmed. At 8:47, the PA system crackled. Garrett Pruitt, please report to the main office. Garrett Pruitt, main office, please. The whispers started within 30 seconds. What did he do? Is he in trouble? I heard he hasn't been in class for a week. Garrett never appeared. Cole sat in HVAC theory and tried to focus on compressor cycles and refrigerant pressures and the specific tolerances required for copper pipe installation in residential ductwork. He wrote notes in his binder. He answered questions when called on. He performed the appearance of normalcy with the practiced ease of someone who had been performing it for 8 months. He was halfway across the blacktop toward his car with his cafeteria tray when someone said his name. Cole. He turned. Raylan Voss was standing 4 feet away. He had seen her every day for months, had observed her from the distances at which he observed everything, had cataloged her rotation schedule and her lunch habits and the fact that she ate alone in her truck and the way she navigated the camera blind spots with unconscious fluency. He knew her face from across classrooms in the hallway light at the angle of someone who was always moving past and never stopping. He had never been looked at by her directly before. Up close, she was something different from the impression. The tattoo he had registered as decoration resolved into detail at close-range wings spreading from her collarbone up toward her jawline, feathered and intricate, each vein individually rendered as if someone had spent long, careful hours committing to the image of a thing trying to free itself. Her eyes were dark brown, very dark, almost black, and they were looking at him with an intensity that made his skin respond before his mind did. "You okay?" she said. "You look like someone walked over your grave." He did not know how to answer that. He did not know this girl, had never exchanged more than accidental eye contact across a classroom, had no framework for a conversation that started here in the middle of a parking lot in the middle of a morning that was already too much to hold. "I am fine," he said. She did not move. Her arms were crossed over the leather jacket and her weight was shifted to one hip, and she had the specific stillness of a person who had decided to stay until they got something that was not a lie. "I know you are not," she said. "I have seen you, Cole. I know where you sleep." His blood went cold. Every instinct he had developed over 8 months fired at once. The rotation, the new spot, the distance, the careful architecture of invisibility. All of it suddenly insufficient, suddenly visible, suddenly exactly as fragile as it had always been. "I am not going to tell anyone," she said. She read the panic the way someone reads a language they have spoken their whole life. "I have known for 3 weeks. If I was gonna say something, I would have said it already. 3 weeks, the shampoo, the toothbrush. The socks. That was you, he said, in the locker. Something crossed her face. Not quite a smile. The shadow of one brief and complicated there and gone. My dad's friend is a cop, she said. He mentioned that someone called in a tip last night. Potential threat. Did not give a name. But I put it together how, because you are the only person in this entire school who would actually do something. Everyone else would have posted about it and moved on. You called. They stood in the parking lot in the ordinary sounds of a school day, car doors closing, voices from a group of freshmen near the east entrance, the maintenance truck making its mid-morning round. Was I right? Cole asked. His voice cracked on the last word. What if I was wrong? What if I just destroyed his life over nothing? Raylan's expression shifted. Not pity, something harder than pity, something that looked like it came from a place that had been tested. My dad always says, trust your gut, she said. Your gut was screaming. Was it not? Cole nodded. Then you did the right thing. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a card, black with silver lettering. Reaper's Customs Motorcycle Repair. In the corner, a logo Cole recognized from the news segments that ran whenever the Iron Saints MC made the local news, which was often enough that most people in Riverside had a relationship with the logo, even if they had never met the people it represented. My dad owns the shop, Raylan said. If you need anything, and I mean anything, you call that number. Cole took the card. His fingers were numb despite the sun. Why are you helping me? She was quiet for a moment. Something moved behind her eyes, a decision being made or confirmed. Because you are one of the good ones, she said, and there are not enough of us left. She walked away before he could respond. He stood in the parking lot with a business card in one hand and a cafeteria tray in the other, and the sudden crushing knowledge that someone had walked through every wall he had built and was standing on the other side of them. Not because she had forced her way through, but because she had been watching from the other side all along. He sat in his car and tried to eat. The pizza went cold. Atlas appeared at the rear wheel and meowed, and Cole tore off a piece of crust, but his hands were still not steady enough to manage more than that. You were one of the good ones. The exact words. The exact words from the text message. He was still sitting with this when his phone buzzed. Unknown number different from the night before, local area code. A link to Instagram. Garrett Pruitt's account, which had not posted anything in 3 weeks. There was a news story posted 4 minutes ago. Cole tapped it. The video was shot in the front seat of a car. Garrett's face filled the screen. He looked worse than Cole had ever seen him. Eyes red and swollen skin, the color of old paper, hands trembling around the phone. His lips were dry, and when he spoke, his voice came out flat, the specific flatness of something emptied of everything that had previously given it texture. I know someone called the cops. I know they are looking for me. I know they think they stopped something. He looked away from the camera towards something in the back seat or the window, something off screen for a long moment. When he looked back, something in his eyes had settled into a stillness that was worse than anything Cole had seen in HVAC theory. They did not. The video cut to black. Cole's hands were shaking so badly he had to use both thumbs to navigate back to his phone. He pressed 9. 1. The operator who answered was different from the night before. A man, this time younger sounding, with the same trained calm, but a different texture to it, the calm of someone who had not yet had it tested as many times. Cole talked fast and the words came out wrong, overlapping each other, circling back, losing their sequence. There is a video, Cole said. Instagram. Garrett Pruitt. He posted it 4 minutes ago. He said they did not stop him. He said the cops did not stop anything. The operator told him to slow down. Cole slowed down. He said it again, each piece separately, the way you assemble something from its components, when the assembled version is too complicated to hand someone whole. The video, the account, the words, they did not. The specific weight of those two words when spoken by someone whose eyes had the quality of a decision already executed. The operator told him officers were being dispatched to Garrett's last known address and to the school as a precaution. He asked Cole where he was. At school, Cole said, Riverside Hargrove High, in the parking lot. Stay there, the operator said. Do not go inside. Officers are en route. Cole hung up. He sat in his car and looked at the school building. The east wing windows caught the November sun and threw it back in flat rectangles of light. Behind those windows, people were moving through the ordinary architecture of a Wednesday. Mr. Calloway in room 114 was probably writing something on the whiteboard with the green marker he always used on Wednesdays for reasons he had never explained. The freshmen near the vending machines were probably still laughing about whatever they had been laughing about when Cole walked past them with his tray. The library was open. The counselor's office had a wait list posted on the door every Wednesday because Wednesday was when she saw the students who needed the most consistent attention. All of it continuing, all of it unaware. He thought about Raylan. She had walked back inside after their conversation in the parking lot. She was probably in the cafeteria right now, or at her locker, or cutting through the gymnasium hallway that she used the same way he used it as a quiet corridor, where the machinery of the school day did not press as close. She was somewhere inside that building, wearing her leather jacket, carrying her silence around her, like armor, carrying the folded note in her inside pocket that she had been carrying for 7 years. He thought about the shampoo she had left in his locker without signing her name. He thought about the socks. He thought about a girl who had grown up watching a world consume the people she loved and who had responded by learning to give without being seen, by learning to help from a distance that required nothing in return, because requiring something in return was the first step toward the kind of loss she had already lived through once. Cole should have stayed in the car. The operator had told him to stay in the car. Every rational calculation available to him said the same thing. You are one person. You are not trained for this. You are 17 years old and you live in a Honda Civic, and your left arm still does not fully extend in cold weather because of the way you have been sleeping on it for 8 months. You are not the variable that changes this outcome. He stayed in the car for 4 more minutes. Then he saw Garrett's car. The silver Honda Accord came into the east lot slowly. Not the speed of a car driven by someone who had forgotten something and needed to come back for it. The speed of a car driven by someone who was looking, who was scanning, who was giving the landscape the specific attention of a person conducting a final survey. It rolled through the lot in a long arc following the perimeter, and Cole watched it from his Wednesday spot with the particular stillness of someone who has stopped breathing without noticing. The Accord pulled into a space near the B-wing entrance. The engine cut. For a long moment, nothing happened. Just Garrett sitting behind the wheel, perfectly still, the same stillness Cole had observed in the East Lot at lunch in HVAC theory, with the pencil tapping in every image he had been carrying since yesterday morning. The stillness of a person who had arrived at the place they were always heading. The driver door opened. Garrett stepped out. He was wearing all black. An oversized jacket despite the mild November air, the kind of jacket that hung wrong on the body, that created bulk and asymmetry in a way that had nothing to do with the cut of the fabric. His right hand was inside the jacket, pressed against his rib cage, and the fabric pulled tight around whatever he was holding against himself. Cole's brain registered the geometry of it before his mind had words for what he was seeing. Then he saw Raylin. She had come out of the B-winged entrance, head down, looking at her phone, moving at the pace of someone with somewhere specific to be crossing the blacktop in the direction of the parking lot, with her leather jacket catching the light and her hair moving in the slight desert wind. She had not looked up. She had not seen Garrett at the car 10 meters to her left. Garrett had not yet turned to see her. They were converging without knowing it. Cole's hand found the door handle. He thought about the operator's voice. "Stay there, officers are en route." He thought about the exit on the east side of the building past the chain-link fence, 30 seconds at a full run from where he was sitting. He thought about Raylan's voice in the parking lot. "Because you are one of the good ones." He thought about his mother's ashes in the glove compartment, about the community college acceptance letter folded in his backpack, about the HVAC certificate that was 8 months away, about the room with walls and a door that locked from the inside that was 8 months away, about everything he had been building slowly and stubbornly and without any help from any system that was supposed to be designed for this purpose, out of routine and silence, and the determination not to become the thing that had happened to his mother. He thought about all of it in less than a second. Then he pushed the car door open and his feet hit pavement and he ran. The world narrowed to a corridor with Raylin at the end of it. Everything else, the cars, the buildings, the edge of the lot where the chain-link fence separated the school grounds from the street, and freedom fell away like the scenery past a train window when you stopped looking at it. There was only the distance closing between him and her, only the sound of his own breathing and the slap of his shoes on the blacktop, and somewhere beneath the noise of his own movement, the terrible clarity of knowing that time had a shape right now, and the shape was not generous. He screamed her name, Raylin. She looked up. Her face registered him first with confusion, then concern, then something older and faster than either of those things, the reflexive danger reading of a girl who had grown up in a house where danger announced itself at all hours, and you learned to read it before it introduced itself formally. Her eyes tracked past him to the figure near the B-wing door. The first shot cracked the air. The sound was nothing like the sound of gunfire in any filmed version of gunfire that Cole had ever heard. It was sharper and more physical, a concussive force that hit the eardrums as impact before it registered as noise, the way a close lightning strike arrives as a physical sensation before you consciously process the sound. Concrete exploded near the entrance, stone chips and gray dust spraying outward in a small, violent cloud. Raylin dropped. She went down without hesitation, without the half-second delay of someone processing what was happening, the way a person goes down when the body has been trained by years of proximity to chaos to respond before the mind finishes its sentence. She hit the blacktop and rolled toward the concrete planter at the edge of the walkway, moving with her arms in front of her face, her leather jacket scraping against the ground. Garrett was walking now, not running, walking with a deliberateness that was worse than running, each step placed with the measured attention of someone who was not afraid of what came next. The rifle at his side, his face empty of everything except the conclusion. Moving toward the entrance, toward the planter where Raylin had taken cover toward the building. Cole changed direction. He cut left toward the side entrance, the one that opened into the gymnasium corridor, the long corridor with the broken fire door hinge and the trophy cases and the lockers decorated with the photographs of ordinary lives. He hit the door at full speed and it flew open, and the fluorescent lights of the interior swallowed him whole. The second shot came from inside the building. The sound in the enclosed space was nothing like the sound in the open lot. It multiplied against the concrete walls and the metal lockers and the tile floor. became everywhere at once, directional and non-directional simultaneously, the sound of something that had no interest in being located. Screaming erupted from every corridor. The specific animal frequency of terror, not the screaming of pain or surprise, but the screaming of a body that has understood something and cannot contain the understanding. Student poured through every available opening. They moved the way water moves when a container fails with no direction except a way colliding with each other and with walls and with Cole, who was moving against the current toward the source through the tide of backpacks and drop phones and faces that were not seeing anything except the exit behind them. A girl hit him so hard they both nearly went down. She bounced off his chest and kept running, her eyes white and registering nothing. Her backpack lay on the floor where the impact had knocked it from her shoulders. Pink with a cartoon print on it, the kind of backpack a 12-year-old carries, the kind of backpack that should never be on the floor of a hallway for this reason. Cole kept moving. The B-wing corridor stretched ahead of him. Lockers on both sides, some with photographs tucked into the vents, class pictures and team photos, and one with a strip of photo booth pictures, 4 frames of 2 girls making faces at the camera. Evidence of the lives that had been running normally in this building 20 minutes ago. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead with the same indifferent hum they produced every other day of every other week. He saw Raylan 20 feet ahead. She had made it inside through the entrance through the first wave of panicking students, but she had stopped. She was standing at her open locker with her back to the main corridor, not moving, not running, her phone in one hand, and her face white as the industrial wall paint behind her. The fear had found the circuit breaker and thrown it, and she was standing in the resulting dark, her body running on whatever came before conscious thought. Cole registered the combination on her open locker, 1422-8. He registered the poster on the wall advertising the winter formal, December 15th, tickets $20, a silver snowflake graphic in the corner. He registered the sound of his own breathing, which was too loud. He registered Garrett rounding the corner at the corridor intersection behind Raylan. Time did what time does in those moments. It did not slow exactly, it became more articulate. Each fraction of a second declared itself with a specificity that normal time does not bother with. Raylan's hand trembling, holding the phone at her side. The rifle in Garrett's hands, black metal, under fluorescent light, the barrel coming up. The exit door to Cole's right, 10 feet, one push bar, and he was outside and alive. And the November air of Riverside, Arizona was 30 seconds away, and behind him would be only the sound of something he had done everything he could to prevent. The exit was closer. Cole's legs carried him toward Raylan. He did not think the word hero, did not think about choosing, did not experience it as a decision at all, which was perhaps the most important thing about it. The decision had been made at some point earlier, maybe in the parking lot when he opened the car door, maybe weeks ago, when he watched through the gap in the fire door and chose not to walk past, maybe in the station parking lot at 2 in the morning, when he pressed 911 while his hands were shaking. At some point before this moment, the decision had been made, and the moment was only the execution. The third shot hit a locker 5 feet to his left. The metal buckled inward like something had punched it from the inside, a dent the size of a human fist, appearing instantaneously in the painted surface. The sound was a physical blow, a flash of white at the edges of his vision. He screamed her name again. Raylan turned. Her eyes found him. Something moved across her face, recognition, then the beginning of a gesture, her hand starting to rise, whether to wave him away or to reach for him, he never knew. He did not slow down. He hit her the way he had been taught, to tackle in the one season of middle school football he had played before his mother's situation had made extracurricular activities an unaffordable luxury. He wrapped both arms around her waist and used the forward momentum of everything he had to throw them both sideways and down. They hit the floor hard. His elbow cracked against the tile, and the pain shot up to his shoulder and beyond, but he was already moving and already scrambling, converting the impact into direction, pulling her with him, both of them moving toward anything with a door. The janitor's closet was 5 feet away. The door was slightly open. A sliver of darkness that smelled of industrial cleaner and floor wax, and something underneath it that was older and dustier and had nothing to do with chemicals. The fourth shot found him. The bullet entered his left shoulder from behind the direction of his momentum, carrying him into it rather than away from it, and it was hot and wrong in the specific way that something wrong in the body is always specific and personal. Nothing like the described experience, nothing like anything that had been described to him. Just heat and a wrongness that occupied the space where normal sensation had been a half second before, and then the arm going numb from shoulder to fingertip, as if it had been removed from the circuit of his body. He looked down, red spreading across the gray shirt, the bleach stain near the hem disappearing under the spreading dark wet color, growing fast, his arm hanging at his side with the specific quality of something that had been disconnected. He got his right hand on Raylan's arm, got his fingers around her wrist. The grip was not elegant or precise. It was the grip of a person with one working hand and a body running on the last of its adrenaline, but it held, and that was what mattered. And he pulled, and they crashed through the closet door together. Mops against the left wall, metal shelving on the right stacked with bottles of cleaner and rolls of paper towels and a box of plastic trash liners. A space designed for one person moving efficiently and entirely unsuited for two people trying to survive. Cole slammed the door with his foot. No lock. He had known there would be no lock. He had registered the absence of a locking mechanism in the half-second visual sweep he had conducted as they came through the door because he had spent 8 months registering all available information about all available spaces, and the gymnasium closet near the B-wing corridor had no interior lock. He pressed his spine against the door, put his feet against the base of the metal shelving unit on the opposite side, pushed with everything that remained in his legs. His shoulder was beginning to announce itself, the numbness giving way to something underneath it that was going to be much worse, that was already becoming much worse, a heat that had its own pulse, and that pulse was not gentle. Raylan was breathing in the specific, shallow, rapid pattern of someone whose body has overridden the mind's attempt to manage a situation. Her hands were in front of her. They were covered in red. His blood transferred from his shoulder to her hands in the moment she grabbed his arm coming through the door. "Quiet," Cole said. His voice came out lower than he intended. "Please, quiet." She put both hands over her mouth. Her eyes above her fingers were enormous. She was looking at his shoulder, at the wet dark spreading across the shirt, at the puddle forming on the tile beneath him. The door handle moved against his spine. Someone was pushing from the other side. A steady, deliberate pressure, testing, not panicking, the pressure of someone who was not in a hurry because they had already decided that hurry was unnecessary. Cole pushed back. His feet found purchase against the shelving unit. The shelving scraped backward half an inch. He pushed harder. The door cracked. 6 inches of fluorescent hallway light cut through the gap. And through the gap, an eye, Garrett's eye, red-rimmed, the whites showing around the iris with the specific quality of someone who had been awake for a very long time, or had been crying for a very long time, or both, looking directly at Cole with a flatness that was not the flatness of indifference. It was the flatness of someone who had gone so far inside themselves that the external world was only dimly visible from where they were standing. The rifle barrel came through the gap, black metal. Cole could see the scratches on the barrel where it had been handled a great deal or not handled carefully enough. The muzzle was 6 inches from his face, close enough to feel the cold radiating off the steel, close enough to see the slight trembling in the barrel from the trembling in Garrett's hands. Cole had one breath of time before whatever came next. He used it. "I see you," he said. The words came from somewhere that the fear and the pain and the survival instinct had not yet reached. Somewhere deep and calm and old, the place that activates when the surface options have run out and only the essential things remain. "I know what invisible feels like," Cole said. His voice was shaking. The blood was running down his arm in a thin, steady stream now dripping from his fingertips onto the white tile. "I know what it feels like when nobody sees you, when you scream and the sound goes nowhere, when you are right there and everyone walks past like you are part of the scenery." The barrel did not move. The eye did not blink. "I know about your dad," Cole said. "I know about what happened. I know about the posts online." He paused. "I know what it feels like to be the person that everything happens to, the person that the world uses up and then forgets to check on." A sound outside, distant, coming from the direction of the street. "My mom died in our bathroom 8 months ago," Cole said. He had never said these words to another person, not the resource officer, not the 911 operator, not anyone. He had kept them locked in the glove compartment with the cardboard box, and he was opening them now in a janitor's closet with a gun barrel 6 inches from his face, because there was nothing left that was more important to protect. "I found her. I had to answer all the questions and sign all the forms and watch them take her away. The landlord changed the locks 3 days later. Everything I owned was inside, all of it, gone." The eye blinked, one slow, deliberate blink, like something a long way down had registered a sound and was responding from that depth with the only movement it could manage. "I have been sleeping in my car since March," Cole said. "I eat lunch alone. I shower at school. I have not had a real conversation with another person in 8 months, except for the girl behind me right now, who I barely know." He could feel Raylan's presence behind him, her hands gripping the back of his shirt, her breath against his neck. "I called the cops last night, not to hurt you, not to get you in trouble, because I did not want this, because I did not want you to end up where my mother ended up." The sound outside was louder now. Sirens, the specific wailing of police vehicles moving fast through city streets, still blocks away, but growing each second, bringing them closer to the building where two boys were on opposite sides of a closet door, and one of them was bleeding. Garrett's hand on the rifle was trembling. Cole could see the muscles in the forearm tightening and releasing, the body having a conversation with itself that the mind had stopped supervising. "It does not have to end like this," Cole whispered. He said it the way you say something to a person you are genuinely afraid of losing, not performing, not strategizing. The way you speak when you have removed everything except the truth, and the truth is that you do not want to watch someone disappear. The sirens were 1 block away, maybe less. Through the gap, Cole watched Garrett's eye. He watched it the way you watch a very small flame in a very large wind, with the understanding that the thing you are watching is fragile and that your watching might be the only thing keeping it alive. And then something happened in that eye. Not peace. Cole would not call it peace. Not redemption, not resolution, not any of the words that would make the story neater than it was. It was something smaller and more honest than any of those words. A flicker of recognition. The recognition of one person who had been invisible and seeing another person who had been invisible and understanding across the gap of a cracked door and a gun barrel, and everything that had led to this moment that they had been standing in the same dark for a long time without knowing the other was there. The gun barrel withdrew, the door eased closed, footsteps, moving away from the closet, down the corridor, getting quieter, moving in the direction of the administrative wing at the far end of the building toward whatever ending Garrett Pruitt had written for himself long before today. Cole did not move. He could not move. The adrenaline was leaving his body the way it always leaves suddenly and completely, and what it left behind was everything it had been holding at bay. Pain. Exhaustion that went past physical into something cellular, something in the bones. A shaking that started in his hands and traveled up his arms and into his chest and would not stop. Cole Raylan said. Her voice was right at his ear. He could feel the warmth of it. You are bleeding really badly, I know. She was crying. He could feel it against the back of his neck, the specific heat of tears. Why did you do that? You should have run. The exit was right there. He thought about answering this with something careful and considered and worthy of the question. Could not leave you, he said instead. Simple. True. The truest thing he had said today, and that was a day that had contained a great deal of truth. The sirens arrived. Multiple vehicles. The sound of tires on pavement and doors opening and voices calling out in the clipped, authoritative language of people trained to project certainty into situations that contained none. Boots on pavement. Commands moving through the building in waves. From somewhere far away at the end of the school, past the administration offices and the principal's wing, a single shot. Then silence. The kind of silence that comes after a final thing. Raylan's arms tightened around Cole from behind. She was holding him the way you hold something you are afraid of losing with your whole body, with the specific strength of someone who has decided that if they hold tightly enough, they can change the physics of loss. She was saying something. He could hear it, but it was coming from a distance that was growing, the words arriving through a medium that was thickening around him. Stay with me, she was saying. Please stay with me. He wanted to tell her he was going to be fine. Wanted to tell her it was a shoulder wound, and people survive shoulder wounds, and the doctors at Mercy General were good, and the surgery would be straightforward, and he would wake up in a clean bed with a bandaged arm, and the worst of it would be behind them. His tongue was too heavy for the words. The closet door exploded open. Men in black tactical gear filled the doorway, helmets and shields, and the specific controlled urgency of people trained for exactly this. Commands in the barking language of crisis response, voices designed to be louder than the noise of the situation they are managing. Cole tried to raise his hands. His right arm went up. His left arm stayed where it was. He is not the shooter, Raylan was screaming behind him. He is not the shooter. He saved my life. Hands in tactical gloves found his shoulder, and Cole screamed, the sound coming out of him involuntary and complete, because the pain was no longer something that could be managed from a distance. The hands were trying to help him, and they were correct to try, and the trying was unbearable. GSW to the left shoulder. Through and through, we need a medic. Cole's vision was doing something he had no framework for. The edges were softening the fluorescent light above him, spreading and blurring the faces above him, losing their precise edges and becoming something approximate. He was aware of the floor under him and of Raylan above him, and of the machines of emergency moving around him, with the purposeful efficiency of people who understood exactly what was happening and what needed to happen next. Raylan's face was above his, dust in her hair, tears on her face cutting clean lines through the gray powder of the hallway floor that had gotten on her cheeks somehow. Her eyes were enormous and very dark and full of something that was more than fear, something older and more specific than fear, the something that lives on the other side of fear after fear has done its worst and you are still there. "Do not you dare," she said. Her voice was fierce in the specific way of someone who has run out of careful. "Do not you dare die on me." "Not planning on it," Cole tried to say. It came out as a breath, a whisper directed at the spreading fluorescent ceiling above him, at the buzzing light and the institutional tile, and the general direction of a universe that had not been particularly interested in his plans for the past 8 months, but that he was asking one more time in the specific, intimate way you ask something from something that might not be listening to. Let this be a thing he survived. He was aware of an oxygen mask. He was aware of Raylin being pulled away by a paramedic, her arms reaching back, her fingers extending toward him, refusing the separation with her whole body until the distance made refusal impossible. He was aware of the specific warm pressure of a hand holding his. A stranger's hand gloved professional doing the job of holding the hand of a boy on a hallway floor. But a hand, a presence, someone choosing in the middle of a crisis that had 1,000 other demands on their attention to make sure he was not alone in the dark. He held on to it. He had not been held on to in 8 months. The light spread and merged and became something general, something ambient, something that was not the buzzing of a fluorescent fixture above a janitor's closet in Riverside, Arizona, but something larger and less specifically located. And Cole Merritt let it carry him, the way you let a current carry you when you have been swimming against it for as long as you have strength for, and the shore you were swimming toward has come close enough that you can afford to stop fighting. He did not know yet how close the shore actually was. He did not know about the white ceiling tiles or the steady mechanical heartbeat of the machines or the doctor with the reading glasses pushed up into her hair who would tell him that the bullet had missed the subclavian artery by 2 centimeters. He did not know about the 3 hours of surgery or the 6 hours of unconsciousness that followed. He did not know about Raylan sitting in the waiting room refusing to leave despite the hospital's policy about family-only visitation, or the specific argument she made that eventually made the charged nurse decide the policy was less important than the girl making it. He did not know about the man who received a phone call in a house on Ridgeback Road 11 miles outside of Riverside and sat very still for a long moment and then began making calls of his own. He knew only the warmth of the hand holding his, and the fading light, and the sensation unfamiliar and specific and entirely new of being somewhere that was not his car, of being held rather than holding, of being the one for the first time in 8 months who did not have to manage the weight alone. The light went out. Harlan Voss received the call at 2:17 in the afternoon. He was in the back bay of Reaper's Customs working on a vintage panhead that a client in Scottsdale wanted restored to the original 1958 specification, and he had his hands deep in the engine and his reading glasses on his nose in the specific focused quiet of a man who found in mechanical work the same thing other men found in prayer. When his phone rang and he saw Raylan's name on the screen, he answered it the way he had answered every call from her since she was old enough to have a phone with the complete and immediate attention of a man who understood that when his daughter called, everything else stopped. She told him she was at Mercy General, that she was unharmed, that the boy who had saved her was in surgery. Harlan said nothing for a long time. Then he asked 2 questions. He asked if she was truly unharmed. He asked the boy's name. Cole Merritt, Raylan said. He pushed me into a closet and blocked the door after he got shot. He talked to the shooter through the crack in the door until the police arrived. He has been living in his car for 8 months, and he still ran toward me when he could have run away. The silence from Harlan's end of the phone had a specific quality. It was not the silence of a man with nothing to say. It was the silence of a man with so much to say that the organization of it required more time than the conversation would naturally accommodate. Put Cole on the phone when he wakes up, Harlan said. And Raylan, yes, Daddy, do not leave that hospital. I was not planning to. Harlan set the phone on the workbench beside the panhead. He looked at his hands, the grease in the lines of his palms, the scar across his right knuckle that had been there since 1987 and that he sometimes forgot was unusual. He looked at the photographs on the wall of the bay, the chapter at Sturgis, the compound in the early days. Raylan at 4 years old sitting on a motorcycle seat with a helmet that covered her entire head and a smile that could have powered the lights in the building. He picked the phone back up and began making calls. At Mercy General Hospital, in a waiting room that smelled of industrial cleaner and the specific anxious breath of too many people in an enclosed space. Raylan Voss sat in a plastic chair against the wall and watched the door that led to the surgical wing and did not move. She had been in this chair for 3 hours. A nurse had offered her food. She had declined. A different nurse had offered her a blanket. She had taken it not because she was cold, but because having something to do with her hands felt necessary, and holding the blanket was something to do with her hands. She sat with it around her shoulders like a shawl and looked at the door and thought about things she was not ready to think about. She thought about a boy running across a parking lot toward her. She thought about the sound of that shot and the way the concrete had erupted near the entrance and the way her body had gone down without asking permission from her mind. She thought about being pulled across a hallway floor by a hand gripping her wrist, a grip that did not feel like the grip of someone who was planning to let go. She thought about a door pressing against her back and a voice in the dark saying, I know what invisible feels like, saying things with the weight of someone who meant them in the most literal possible sense. She thought about 8 months. 8 months in a car. She tried to construct what that meant in terms of days and could not hold the number in a way that felt real. She tried to construct what it meant in terms of mornings. The alarm at 5:45, the unfolding of a body from a space designed for something else, the drive to the McDonald's on 5th Street, the ritual of the buzzing bathroom mirror, the deliberate geography of a person whose entire energy was directed toward not being noticed, who had still in the middle of all of that called 911 because he could not leave someone else in danger, who had still run toward her across a parking lot. She thought about the shampoo she had left in his locker, the socks, the granola bars. She had told herself she was doing it because it was practical, because it was necessary, because someone needed to do something and she happened to be the person who had noticed. She had told herself it was simple, uncomplicated, a transaction with no emotional content. She was aware sitting in the plastic chair that she had been lying to herself. She was aware of something else too. Something that sat in the back of her chest with the weight of an old familiar thing. The leather and the Brotherhood and her father's world closing around someone new. She had watched it happen. She had seen the moment in the parking lot when Cole took the business card from her hand, and she had seen in his face the way the card landed like something solid in a landscape that had not had solid things in it for a long time. She had seen that before. She had seen it in her mother's face in photographs from before Raylan could form memories. The way Harlan's world had felt like shelter at first, like strength, like belonging to something larger than yourself. She knew how that felt. She had grown up inside it. She also knew what came next. She sat in the plastic chair and held the blanket and watched the door and tried not to think about hangers clicking in an empty closet. The door to the surgical wing opened. Raylan stood. The nurse told her the surgery had been successful. The bullet had passed through, cleanly missing the artery and the bone's significant blood loss, but no permanent structural damage. He was in recovery. He was going to be all right. She crossed the room in 3 steps and was through the door before the nurse finished the sentence. Cole was awake when she got to the room. He was looking at the ceiling with the particular expression of someone who has been unconscious for several hours and is only partially confident that what they are currently experiencing is real. There were machines on both sides of him. His left shoulder was bandaged so heavily it changed the whole shape of him under the hospital gown. His color was bad grayish pale in the way of someone who has lost too much blood, and the blood has not yet been fully replaced. But his eyes, when they found her face, were present, clear, entirely his. Raylan crossed the room and took his right hand with both of hers. Her fingers were cold. They were always cold. She held on. "You are awake," she said. Her voice cracked on the second word, and she did not try to prevent it. "You have been out for 6 hours," she said. "I thought." She stopped. She swallowed the rest of that sentence. Her jaw tightened. She was aware of herself doing it, the old mechanism, the armor, clicking back into place, and she was aware of choosing consciously to not let it. "Do not ever do that again," she said. "Do what Cole said." His voice was rough and slow, the voice of someone climbing back up through layers. "Take a bullet for me." "We already had this conversation," he said. "In the closet? Well, I am having it again." He squeezed her hand. The pressure was lighter than it had been in the closet, the grip of someone running on the reserves after the reserves had already been depleted. But it was deliberate, intentional, the grip of someone making a choice rather than a reflex. "There is a video," Raylan said after a moment. "Someone filmed you from a classroom window, running across the parking lot, pulling me inside. It is already everywhere." Cole closed his eyes. He said nothing. "They need an address," Raylan said. Her voice went quieter. "For discharge. They need somewhere to send you." The silence that followed had the quality of a thing that had been coming for a long time and had finally arrived. "I do not have one," Cole said. He was looking at the ceiling, not at her. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I do not have an address. I do not have a home. I have been living in my car since my mother died in February. The landlord changed the locks 3 days after. I have been in the parking lot at Hargrove High School since March." Raylan held his hand. She did not say anything for a long time. She did not gasp, did not pull away, did not produce the cascade of sympathetic sounds that Cole had been dreading, the sounds that turned a person's survival into a tragedy to be processed by someone else. She sat with it the way you sit with something true that requires a moment of just being true before anything can be done about it. Then she picked up her phone. "My dad needs to hear this," she said. "From you, from both of us." She dialed. The phone rang once. The voice that came through the speaker was rough in the way of a man who had been waiting next to his phone for 3 hours and answered before the first ring finished. "Raylan, tell me you are okay." "I am okay, Daddy. I am at the hospital. Cole is awake. I am putting you on speaker." Cole Merritt. The voice filled the hospital room with a gravity that had nothing to do with volume. "My daughter tells me you took a bullet for her." Cole started. "I could not let her get hurt. You could have run. Raylan says the exit was closer." "Yes, sir, but you did not run." "No, sir. And she tells me you have been living in your car for 8 months. That true?" "Yes, sir." The silence from Harlan's end had the quality of a very large and very deliberate thing being assembled. The silence of a man who had processed the information and was now determining what to do with it. "I am coming to that hospital," Harlan said. His voice was quiet, not the quiet of someone who was unsure, The quiet of someone who had already made every decision and was stating the results. The line went dead. Cole looked at Raylan. "Is your father going to kill me?" he asked. Raylan looked at him with an expression that lived somewhere between fear and hope, and something that had no name, but that had been in her eyes all day, building, becoming more present with each hour. "I do not know what he is going to do," she said honestly, "but when my dad decides something—" She paused. The whole world moves. Harlan Voss arrived 2 hours after the phone call ended. Cole heard him before he saw him. Not footsteps exactly, though the footsteps were there, heavy and deliberate, in the corridor outside the room. What he heard first was the quality of the silence that preceded the man, the way the ambient noise of the hospital, the rolling carts and the soft-soled shoes and the distant paging system seemed to reorganize itself around an approaching presence, the way water reorganizes around the bow of something large moving through it. Then the door opened. There are men who fill rooms. Cole had understood this as a concept without having experienced it directly. Harlan Voss was not a concept. He was 6 feet 4 inches of a life lived without apology, dressed in a leather vest covered in patches that told the story of decades Cole did not have the vocabulary yet to read. His gray beard was braided at the ends with small silver clasps. His arms were covered from wrist to shoulder in tattoos so dense they read as a second skin rather than decoration. His eyes were pale blue, almost gray, the color of a winter sky in the hour before the temperature drops, and they moved around the hospital room with the quiet, systematic attention of a man who had learned long ago to read every environment he entered before he decided how to occupy it. He looked at Raylan first. Raylan stood. The single word she said was smaller than any other word Cole had heard from her. "Daddy." Like the presence of the man compressed even her voice into something younger, something that lived beneath all the armor, in the silence, in the 7 years of carrying a folded note in an inside pocket. Harlan crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into him. His arms went around her completely. She disappeared into his chest the way something small disappears when the thing it has been pressing against finally gives way. And for a moment there was no Iron Saints, MC President, no compound on Ridgeback Road, no Brotherhood of 300. There was only a father holding his daughter in a hospital room, his eyes closed, his jaws tight, every large and road-worn and carefully maintained piece of him set aside for the duration of that embrace. When he set her down, his eyes were wet. He did not acknowledge the wetness. It was simply there, the way weather is simply there, not requiring comment. "You are not going back to that school," he said. His voice was quiet in the way that certain quiet things are louder than volume. "Dad," Raylan said, "I am fine. I do not care. We will find another way. Online courses, tutors, whatever it takes, but you are not going back to that building." Then he turned to Cole. Up close, Harlan Voss was more than the sum of the parts Cole had cataloged from across the room. The tattoos had texture, raised scars beneath the ink that spoke of injuries absorbed decades ago and long since incorporated into the architecture of the man. His hands were enormous, scarred across the knuckles, the hands of someone who had spent a lifetime working on machines and occasionally on problems that machines could not solve. A thin white scar ran along his jawline and disappeared into the gray beard. But what Cole registered most in the first full second of being looked at by this man was that the looking was not what he had expected. He had expected assessment, had expected the weighing of a threat or the evaluation of a liability. He had expected the particular attention that powerful men give to people who have entered their orbit uninvited. What he got instead was something older and more private than any of those things. Harlan was looking at Cole, but somewhere behind those winter eyes, something else was happening. A recognition that had nothing to do with Cole specifically. The recognition of a boy with nothing. A boy the world had forgotten to make arrangements for. A fish surviving on stubbornness and routine, and the refusal to become the worst thing that had happened to him. Harlan was looking at Cole Merritt and seeing himself at 17. The silence held for a long moment. Then Harlan sat down in the chair beside the bed, leaned forward with his elbows on his knees and his enormous hands clasped in front of him, and looked at Cole with a directness that required no performance. "Tell me," he said. So Cole told him. He told him about February, about the bathroom floor and the needle, and the 911 call, and the forms he signed, and the bag with the zipper that made a sound he heard every night when he closed his eyes. He told him about the landlord and the changed locks, and the 4 months of rent, and the man who looked at him the way people look at something stuck to their shoe. He told him about the Honda Civic and the rotation schedule, and the McDonald's on 5th and the HVAC certificate that was 8 months away, and the careful daily architecture of not being seen. He told him about Atlas, about tearing meat from the cafeteria chicken and leaving it on the pavement, and the distance shrinking from 10 feet to 2 over 3 weeks until the cat pressed against his leg and purred like a small engine of warmth in a cold world. He told him about Garrett Pruitt and the pencil tapping and the parking lot and the phone call at 2 in the morning and the 911 call with hands shaking so badly he had to use both thumbs. He told him about the Instagram video and the second 911 call and running across the parking lot when the exit was closer and easier, and every rational calculation available to him pointed in the opposite direction. He told him about the closet door and the eye through the crack and the words that had come from somewhere he could not locate on any internal map. The words about being invisible, about being the person the world uses up and forgets to check on. Harlan listened to all of it without interrupting, without changing his expression, with the complete and undivided attention of a man who had decided that the most important thing he could do in this moment was hear every word. When Cole finished, Harlan was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "My daughter told me the exit was 10 feet away." "Yes, sir." "And you ran toward her instead." "Yes, sir." Harlan looked at his own hands, at the scars on the knuckles and the grease that no amount of cleaning fully removed from the lines of his palms, at the evidence of a life spent working on things that were broken and making them run again. "I was 19 years old," Harlan said, "the first time I slept in a car. Mine was a Ford pickup with a broken heater and a passenger window that would not fully close. It was January in Flagstaff, and I was so cold some mornings I could not open my hands for the first hour after I woke up." He paused. "I had a brother who had left, a mother who could not manage it, a system that had tried to process me twice and failed both times." He looked up at Cole. "I know what it costs to keep going when there is nothing underneath you holding you up. I know what it takes to build a life out of nothing but the refusal to stop." Cole said nothing. His shoulder was throbbing in a steady, deep rhythm that the medication was managing but not eliminating. He was aware of Raylan standing near the window, very still listening. "You had nothing," Harlan said. "And when the moment came, you gave everything." He stood. When he stood, the room reorganized itself around him again, the way rooms did. He put one hand on Cole's good shoulder. Careful. The gentleness of it was unexpected in the way that gentleness from a very large and very strong person is always unexpected. The gentleness that takes more deliberate effort than the alternative. "That is not courage," Harlan said. "That is not heroism." His voice had dropped to something barely above the level of a private conversation. "That is brotherhood. That is what it means to be family. And we take care of family." He looked at Cole for one more long moment, Then he said, "Get some rest. I will be back in the morning." He walked out, his boots on the linoleum floor, the door closing behind him with the soft mechanical click of a hospital door that was designed to close quietly and did. Cole looked at Raylan. She was looking at the door her father had just walked through. Her expression was complicated in a way that Cole had not yet developed enough shared history with her to fully read. There was something there that was not quite pride and not quite grief, something that lived in the territory between the two, where the most difficult feelings tend to settle when they cannot decide which direction to travel. She turned back to him. "Get some sleep," she said. Her voice was steadier than it had been before her father arrived. Something had shifted in her, some internal calibration occurring that he was not entirely certain was in his favor. He wanted to ask her about it. He did not have the energy left to ask. He closed his eyes. He slept. At 6:47 in the morning, Cole was woken by a sound that began as a distant rumble and grew into something that had no precedent in any sound he had previously heard. It was not thunder. Thunder faded. This grew. It deepened. The building itself began to vibrate, a fine tremor that traveled up through the hospital bed frame and into his spine and arrived in his consciousness as something that was more physical than auditory. The water in the plastic cup on his nightstand began to move, concentric circles spreading from the center outward, rippling against the sides of the cup. A nurse appeared in his doorway, eyes wide, stethoscope swinging. "Are you Cole Merritt?" she said. "You need to come see this." She helped him into a wheelchair, careful with the left shoulder, careful with the sling. Raylan appeared from the recliner in the corner where she had spent the night, still wearing the hospital blanket, her hair tangled, her eyes carrying the alertness of someone who had been half awake for hours waiting for something without knowing exactly what. She took the wheelchair handles from the nurse without asking. They went down the corridor to the window at the end of the hall. Below them, filling the hospital parking lot from one edge to the other, spilling out onto the surrounding streets and blocking traffic in every direction, was an ocean of chrome and leather and American steel. Motorcycles, more of them than Cole could count, lined up in rows so precise they looked like a military formation, their chrome catching the early November sun and throwing bars of light across the pavement. The riders stood beside their machines motionless, each one wearing a leather vest heavy with patches. Some were enormous men with gray beards and arms like dock lines. Some were women just as tall, just as still, with the composure of people who had chosen a life that did not accommodate softness and had not regretted the choice. Some were young, barely older than Cole, with fresh ink still dark against their skin. Some were old, white-haired and weathered, standing with the rigid, upright posture of men who had been through things that did not leave and had learned to carry the weight in their spine rather than their face. Every single motorcycle had a photograph taped to its handlebars. Cole squinted through the window glass. His own face stared back at him from 300 handlebars. His school ID photograph taken last September, the one where he had worn the blue shirt and tried to look like a person whose life was organized and whose future was legible. He stared at his own face multiplied 300 times and could not speak. Raylan pushed the wheelchair toward the elevator. They came through the lobby where nurses and patients and family members had gathered at the glass entrance doors, with phones raised recording something that none of them could fully explain to themselves. The automatic doors slid open and the November air hit Cole's face cold and sharp and carrying the smell of exhaust and morning frost and something older that was harder to name, something that belonged to the desert and the road. Raylan pushed the wheelchair out onto the concrete apron in front of the entrance. 300 heads turned. The silence was so complete it had physical weight. 300 people looking at a skinny boy in a hospital wheelchair with a bandaged shoulder and dark circles under his eyes and an expression that belonged to someone who had been told something enormous and was still in the process of determining whether it was real. Harlan stepped forward from the front of the formation. He was wearing his full colors. The leather vest covered in a lifetime of patches, each one a chapter, in a story that Cole did not yet know how to read, but was beginning to understand was being offered to him. He walked slowly toward the wheelchair, each step deliberate, each step a word in a language that did not require translation. When he reached Cole, he stopped. He looked down at him for a long moment with those pale winter eyes. Then Harlan Voss, president of the Iron Saints, MC, 250 pounds of road and leather, and the authority of a man who had built everything he had from nothing with his own hands, got down on one knee. The movement went through the crowd like a current through water. 300 bikers went to their knees in unison. The sound of it, leather and denim and boots on hospital pavement, was a single sound, a collective sound, something that bypassed individual perception and arrived directly in the chest. Some put their fists over their hearts, some bowed their heads, some closed their eyes. All of them knelt. For a boy who had been sleeping in a parking lot, for a boy who had been invisible. For a boy who had spent 8 months making himself small enough that the world would not notice him, and had then made himself large enough in 30 seconds of a school hallway to change the outcome. Cole could not breathe, could not think, could not process the image in front of him with any of the cognitive tools he had available. He cried. He did not try to stop it, had no mechanism left for stopping it. These were not the tears of one thing. They were 8 months of things compressed and stored in the only container available, which was his body, and the container had reached its limit. The night he found his mother, the landlord's office, the first night in the car when the cold came through the door seals and he understood that no one in the world knew where he was, the McDonald's bathroom and the buzzing light and the cracked mirror, the granola bars, the rotation schedule. Every morning at 5:45, unfolding his body from a space that was not made for it. All of it coming out now in a hospital parking lot in Riverside, Arizona, in front of 300 people on their knees. Harlan spoke. His voice carried across the parking lot without effort. The voice of a man who had never needed volume because he had always had something more reliable than volume. Cole Merritt, you had nothing. The system failed you. The world forgot you. You spent 8 months surviving completely alone, sleeping in a car, keeping your mother's ashes in a glove compartment because you could not afford to bury her properly. And when the moment came, when the exit was right there and you could have saved yourself, you chose my daughter's life over your own. He paused. That is not something you decide in that moment. That is something you already are. Harlan reached into his vest and withdrew something folded. He shook it open. A leather vest, black and heavy, the leather thick and worked by hand. On the back, in carefully stitched letters, honorary brother. Above it, the Iron Saints insignia. Below it, in lettering the same size as the rest, Cole Merritt. We do not give this lightly, Harlan said. Some men ride with us for 20 years and never earn it. You earned it in 30 seconds. 30 seconds of choosing someone else over yourself. That is more than most people give in a lifetime. He stood. He helped Cole to his feet. Cole swayed the weakness of blood loss and surgery and a night of sedation, making itself known the moment he was upright. But Raylan was there instantly, her hand on his right arm, her grip firm and steady and entirely without hesitation. May I, Harlan said. Cole nodded. Harlan slid the vest carefully over the right arm, then with enormous and deliberate gentleness maneuvered it over the injured left shoulder. The leather settled onto Cole's frame with a weight that was more than physical. Heavy and warm and carrying the smell of oil and road dust and something else underneath those things that Cole could not name, but that felt in the way that the truest things feel like belonging. The 300 rose to their feet as one. Then they roared. Not with engines, with voices. His name moving through 300 throats and becoming something that bounced off the hospital walls and rolled out into the street where drivers had stopped their cars and stepped out to see what was happening. Cole, Cole, Cole. A sound that had no precedent in his experience. The sound of being claimed by a large number of people who had made a collective decision about who you were and intended to make sure you knew it. They came forward one at a time. An older man with a white ponytail and a face that had been through weather shook Cole's good hand with both of his. My granddaughter was in that school, he said. You gave those kids time, thank you. His voice was steady, but his eyes were not. A woman with fierce green eyes and a scar from her ear to her chin wrapped her arms around Cole with the careful precision of someone who knew where the injury was and intended to avoid it. My son was killed in a school shooting 3 years ago, she said quietly against his shoulder. Nobody protected him. You protected Raylan. You are a real one. A younger biker, maybe 30, with the particular look of someone who had been through the same territory Cole had been through and had come out the other side with specific knowledge about what it cost, pressed an envelope into Raylan's hands. First and last month's rent, he said to Cole directly. I was where you were at your age. Someone did this for me. Now I am doing it for you. They kept coming, each one with something, each one with a story that touched the edges of Cole's story or reflected it back from a different angle. Envelopes pressed into Raylan's arms because Cole's left arm was in a sling and his right arm was occupied with handshakes and brief embraces from people who communicated in the language of presence rather than words. The pile grew until Raylan was holding a tower of envelopes against her chest, her arms full, her face doing the complicated work of containing something too large for her usual expressions to manage. After an hour after every single member of the Iron Saints had paid their respects, Harlan raised one hand. Silence fell immediately. We ride, he said. 300 engines started simultaneously. The sound was something that bypassed the ears and went directly to the chest, to the bones, to something ancient and physical that the body recognized before the mind had finished processing it. The sound of American steel and desert road and a kind of freedom that had its own costs and its own rewards and that could not be fully explained to someone who had never sat on a motorcycle at 6 in the morning with the highway ahead of them and nothing behind them that required going back. Every bike had Cole's photograph on the handlebars, 300 school ID photos of a boy in a blue shirt who had not yet understood what the year was going to ask of him. Harlan helped Cole onto the back of his motorcycle, a machine that looked like it had been built from the road itself, black and chrome, and carrying the gravity of something with a great many miles behind it. Cole gripped the handlebar with his good hand and felt the engine vibrate up through the frame and into his body. Raylan mounted her own bike beside them, smaller but no less present, her leather jacket back on her shoulders, her hair loose and moving in the morning wind, her face carrying the complicated expression she had been wearing since her father arrived. Hold on with your good arm, Harlan said over the engine. We are taking you home. They pulled out in formation, two long lines with Cole at the center. They rode through Riverside slowly, the pace of ceremony rather than speed. People on sidewalks stopped and turned. A woman at a traffic light recognized Cole from the news coverage that had been running since the night before, and pressed both hands over her mouth, tears visible on her face from 20 feet away. They rode to an apartment complex on the north side of the city. Cole knew the complex. He had driven past it more times than he could count. He had parked in its overflow lot on a desperate night in April when every other spot he used had been compromised, and a security guard had knocked on his window at 2 in the morning and told him to move along. He had sat in that overflow lot after the knock and looked up at the lit windows of the building, at the lit windows of all the buildings, at the evidence of people living inside walls with heaters and refrigerators and beds. And he had thought about the distance between where he was and where they were, and had tried not to calculate it in terms of what was realistic. They stopped in front of Building C. Raylan dismounted and helped Cole off Harlan's bike. She reached into her jacket pocket and produced a key. Ordinary gold-colored metal. A house key. The most extraordinary ordinary object Cole had ever been asked to hold. 1 year paid in full, she said. Furnished. Close to school. Close to the shop where you start Monday. Cole looked at the key in his palm. Harlan said, "But we counted the envelopes this morning. $47,000. Your college fund, your emergency fund, your never sleep in a car again fund." Cole's throat had closed. He could not produce words. He was aware that words were expected and that he did not have them, and that this was acceptable, that the situation did not require words from him, that his presence was the only thing being asked for. They walked him upstairs. Raylan unlocked the door. The apartment was small. Cole had lived in smaller. He had lived in a space that was exactly the dimensions of the interior of a 2003 Honda Civic, and he had made that work for 8 months, so small was not a word that carried weight for him in the way it might for someone else. But it was not small to him. It was enormous. It was the largest space he had occupied in 8 months, measured not in square footage, but in what it contained. A couch that was soft and deep and looked like the kind of couch that received you rather than resisting you. A kitchen table made of real wood with 2 chairs. A television. A kitchen with a refrigerator that hummed softly, and when Raylan opened it, was stocked with actual food. Real food, the kind of food that did not need to be rationed across 5 days or eaten with the speed of someone who was not certain there would be more. He stood in the doorway of the bedroom. A bed. Queen-sized, with a comforter thick enough to survive a desert winter, and sheets that smelled of laundry detergent. 2 pillows. A closet with clothes in his size tags still on someone having guessed his measurements, with enough accuracy that the guesses would work. "It is just a bed," Raylan said. No, Cole said. "It is not." On the kitchen table, a note in handwriting so heavy it had pressed through the paper. "This is your home now, son. You are not alone anymore. Sunday dinners at my house, 5 o'clock. Do not be late, Harlan." Son. Cole sat down on the couch. His couch. The leather vest creaked as he leaned back. Raylan sat beside him. Harlan stood in the doorway with his arms crossed and his winter eyes doing their quiet, thorough work of seeing. "How do you feel?" Raylan asked. Cole looked around at the walls that were his, at the door that locked from the inside, at the key on the table, at the vest on his shoulders that said he belonged somewhere, at Raylan, who had saved him first with shampoo and silence before he saved her with his body and his blood, at Harlan, who was using the word son the way you use a word that has always been true and you are only now saying out loud. "Like I am dreaming," Cole said. "You are not," Harlan said. "This is real. You earned this. Not with what you had, with what you gave." He turned and walked out, his boots heavy on the stairs, the sound of him departing, leaving them alone in the apartment that was no longer empty because Cole was in it. Raylan did not move from the couch. She sat close enough that their shoulders almost touched, but she was not smiling. Cole noticed this the way he noticed things carefully and from the side without making it a direct observation. She was looking at the vest on his shoulders. Her jaw was set. Her hands were in her lap with the fingers interlocked and the knuckles white. The expression on her face was the expression of someone fighting a battle that had been going on much longer than today. He thought about the note in her inside pocket, the 3 sentences, the hangers clicking in an empty closet, the girl who was 10 years old when she woke up and the world she had expected to be there was not. He understood it then. Not what had happened yesterday, what was happening right now. She was watching her father pull someone into the same world that had cost her the most, and she was hearing those hangers swaying again. He said the only thing he had left. "Thank you," he said, "for the shampoo." Raylan looked at him. The war on her face was still being fought, but something in it shifted 1 degree, the smallest possible movement of a wall that had been standing for a very long time. "You knew I figured it out," she said. "Second week," Cole said, "and you never said anything. Neither did you." The ghost of something crossed her face. Not a smile yet. The suggestion of one. The memory of how smiling worked. "Fair enough," she said. Outside, the sound of 300 engines starting one last time, rolling through the streets of Riverside like a promise being kept. The weeks that followed were not easy. Cole had not expected them to be easy. He had spent 8 months learning that the world did not become easy simply because the circumstances changed. You carried the previous version of things with you into the new version. The body remembered what the mind was trying to move past. He woke up every morning and for 3 or 4 seconds, he did not know where he was. His body prepared itself for the steering wheel against his knees, the cramped fold of his spine, the cold seeping through the car door seals. Then his hand touched the cotton sheets and the ceiling came into focus above him, and the refrigerator hummed in the kitchen, and the reality settled over him like something warm. He was in a bed, in an apartment, in a home. Then the other things came. The hallway, the fluorescent light and the sound it made, the crack of the rifle, and the way the lockers multiplied the sound until it came from everywhere at once. Garrett's eye through the gap in the door, red and empty, and looking at him with the flat patience of someone who had already decided. The gun barrel 6 inches from his face, the heat in his shoulder before the pain arrived. Dr. Whitfield had told him about this. PTSD is a wound, she had said in the flat, practical tone of someone who had said it many times and meant it every time. Wounds heal better when you treat them. She had given him the name of a therapist, Dr. Patricia Wynn, an office on Carlisle Street with plants in the waiting room and a couch so deep it was almost architectural. Cole had gone on Tuesday of the second week. He had sat on the couch and said nothing for 19 minutes. Dr. Wynn had sat across from him with her hands folded and her expression open and let the silence do what silence does when you give it enough room. On the 20th minute, Cole said, "I can still feel the door against my back. The pressure of someone pushing from the other side." That is where they started. Harlan had placed a note on the refrigerator, held in place by a magnet shaped like a motorcycle. "Therapy appointment Tuesday 3 p.m. Non-negotiable. Trauma does not just go away. We deal with it. Dad. Dad." The word had appeared without discussion. Harlan used it the way he used everything, with the certainty of a person who had decided something and did not revisit the decision. Cole had not corrected him, not because he did not notice it, but because correcting it would have required acknowledging how precisely it landed, how right it was, how much it cost to hear a word he had never had a reliable version of, and to understand that this version was being offered freely, without conditions, by a man who had nothing to gain from it except the giving itself. He started at Reaper's Customs on Monday. The shop was a converted warehouse on Industrial Drive with oil stains on the concrete floor that had become part of the architecture in walls covered with photographs. Harlan at 19 on his first bike. The chapter at a rally in South Dakota, chrome and leather against an enormous sky. Raylan at 4 years old, sitting on a motorcycle seat with a helmet that swallowed her entire head and a smile that the helmet could not contain. Harlan started him on basic work: oil changes, tire rotations, brake pad inspections. He handed Cole a wrench on the first morning and said, "You build from the ground up, rush the foundation, and the whole thing falls." That is true for engines. That is true for people. Cole liked the work the way he had liked the H theory, which was to say, he liked it in his hands and in his back and in the satisfaction of a thing that was broken running again after you had attended to it carefully enough. The other mechanics communicated in the language of doing rather than saying, and Cole, who had built 8 months of survival on silence and routine, was fluent in that language. But Raylan was pulling away. It started small enough that Cole almost missed it. She stopped coming to the shop after school, stopped texting in the evenings. At school, she returned to her old geometry head-down jacket, zipped the trajectory of someone moving through a space that had been determined to require the minimum possible contact with his contents. On Monday, she walked past his desk without looking up. On Wednesday, he found a granola bar in his locker and could not determine whether it was affection or a farewell. By the end of the second week, the silence between them had grown into something with structure, something that had been constructed deliberately brick by carefully placed brick. He texted her. "Fine," she wrote back. "Busy. Later." The economy of those words said more than the words themselves. He tried to catch her eye in American history. She studied her notebook. On Thursday evening, Cole was cleaning up after his shift when Harlan appeared in the bay doorway. He was not wearing his vest, just a flannel shirt and his jeans and his boots and his hands deep in his pockets, which Cole had learned was Harlan's version of vulnerability. Hands in pockets meant the armor was down, meant the man behind the mountain was present and available in a way that was not always accessible. "You notice anything about Raylan?" Harlan said. He was looking at the motorcycle on the lift rather than at Cole, a vintage bike that a client wanted restored. "She has been quiet," Cole said. "Quiet is her default. This is something else." Harlan turned. His eyes were troubled in a way Cole had not seen before. Harlan's eyes were usually certain, the eyes of a man who had made every decision in his life without looking back. Tonight they held doubt, and doubt on Harlan Voss's face was like a crack in a mountain, small, but going all the way through. "She will not talk to me," Cole said. "She will not talk to me either." Harlan's jaw worked. His beard moved with it, and that scares me more than anything that happened at that school. Because I understand bullets, I have never understood my daughter's silence. Cole set down his shop rag. He thought about how to ask what he needed to ask. "What happened with her mother?" he said. The silence that followed was deep and old. Harlan crossed his arms and looked at the floor, and when he looked up, his face had the openness of a man who had carried something private for a long time and had decided that the carrying was no longer working. "Her name was Diane," Harlan said. "We met when I was 24. She was 22. She knew exactly what I was when she married me. She thought she could hold both worlds in one set of hands, our family and the club. For a few years it worked, then it stopped working." He paused. "She asked me to step back, be a father first, be a president second. She was not asking me to leave the club. She was asking me to choose what came first when they pulled in opposite directions. And you did not. I was too proud and too stupid. I told her she did not understand." He looked at Cole directly. You know what a man is really saying when he tells a woman she does not understand. He is saying her feelings do not count. Cole said nothing, so she left, packed while Raylan was asleep, left a note, 3 sentences. Harlan recited them from memory. I love you. I cannot do this anymore. Please forgive me. He said them the way you recite something you have spent years trying to understand and have not succeeded. Raylan was 10, and she has been paying for my mistake ever since. Harlan uncrossed his arms, stood in the bay with his hands at his sides, which was the most undefended Cole had ever seen him. Every friendship she does not make, every person she keeps at a distance, every time she puts on that jacket like it is something she was born in. That is my failure wearing her face. She is watching the same story start again, Cole said. Yes, Harlan looked at him, and she is right to be afraid. I brought you into this because I saw myself in you, a boy with nothing, a boy the world forgot. I wanted to give you what nobody gave me, but I did not think about what it looked like from where she stands. From where she stands, I am doing exactly what I did with Diane, choosing the brotherhood before the people. Cole was quiet for a moment. What do I do? He asked. This is not yours to fix, Harlan said. I broke it. I am going to be the one to say what I should have said 7 years ago. He picked up his vest from the workbench and put it on. But I need you to know something. You are not in this family because of the vest. You are in it because Raylan chose you before I ever did. She saw you in that parking lot, and she helped you with her own hands quietly without asking for anything. That was her choice, and I will not let my pride destroy something that my daughter built. He walked out of the bay. Cole found Raylan the next morning in the school parking lot. She was sitting in her truck with the engine off, looking at the steering wheel with the focused attention of someone who had decided that the steering wheel was the only safe thing in her field of vision. He knocked on the passenger window. She did not look up. He knocked again. He watched her close her eyes for a moment, the internal weighing visible even through the glass. Then she reached across and unlocked the door. He got in. The truck smelled of motor oil, and the faded memory of a Pine Air freshener dried out and curled at the edges hanging from the mirror. On the dashboard, a photograph was tucked into the sun visor. A woman with dark hair and Raylan's exact eyes holding a baby wrapped in yellow, the baby reaching up toward the woman's face with one tiny hand. The woman was smiling. The smile of someone who does not yet know what is coming. I talked to your dad last night, Cole said. Raylan's jaw tightened. He told me about your mom, about why you are afraid. You do not know what it is like, she said. Her voice was low, the voice of something that had been held at a controlled temperature for a long time. To love something and watch it consume the people around it. The leather, the patches, the brotherhood. It starts as a gift and then it becomes everything, and you are just standing there watching someone disappear into it. Cole said nothing. He let her continue. I was 10 years old, she said. I woke up and her closet was empty. The hangers were still moving, just clicking against each other in the draft. She was gone. Left a note, 3 sentences. I have been carrying it in my jacket pocket for 7 years. I love you. I cannot do this anymore. Please forgive me. 3 sentences. That is all I was worth to her. Her knuckles on the steering wheel had gone white. And now here is my dad giving you the vest, calling you son, and you are going to love it, Cole. I can already see it. The shop and the Sunday dinners and the brotherhood of all of it. And one day it is going to be bigger than everything else. And I am going to be 10 years old again listening to those hangers. She pressed her forehead against the steering wheel. The stillness of someone who has said the worst thing they know and is waiting in the aftermath. Cole sat in the passenger seat of her truck and looked at the photograph of Diane Voss smiling with her daughter in her arms and thought about what to say. "I am not your father," he said. Raylan did not lift her head. "I am not going to disappear into anything. I am not going to get swallowed. You want to know why?" She looked up. Her eyes were red. Her face had the openness that comes after the armor has been worn long enough to become exhausting. "Because I have already lost everything," Cole said. "I have had nothing. I know exactly what it looks like when everything is gone. And I am never going to be the reason someone else feels that way. Especially not you." She stared at him. "You left shampoo in my locker," Cole said. "You left socks and granola bars, and you never said a word. Never asked for anything. That is not the club. That is not leather and patches and brotherhood. That is just you, the person you are when nobody is watching. That is who I ran toward in that hallway." Raylan's face changed. Not dramatically, not the way faces change in the stories where everything resolves with a single gesture. It changed the way walls change when the water behind them finally finds the weakness it has been looking for. Slowly, with the quiet inevitability of something that was going to happen eventually and has simply arrived at its moment. "Your dad told me something," Cole said. "He said you chose me before he did. He said the shampoo was a choice. Every time you looked away when my car was in the parking lot was a choice. You chose to see me when nobody else did." She closed her eyes. A tear moved down her jaw and fell onto her leather jacket. "I am scared," she whispered. "I know," Cole said. "So am I. Of what?" "Of having something to lose." His voice cracked. "For 8 months I had nothing. No home, no family, nobody who would notice if I was gone. And that was terrible, but it was safe because you cannot lose what you do not have. And now I have an apartment and a man who calls me son and $47,000 and a stray cat who waits for me by the dumpster every day. And a girl who puts shampoo in my locker. And every morning I wake up terrified because now there is something the world can take." Raylan opened her eyes. "So what do we do?" she said. "We do what your dad should have done with your mom," Cole said. "We do not let anything be bigger than the people. And when it gets hard and the fear starts building, we say it out loud. We do not write 3 sentences and disappear." She looked at him for a long time. Outside the truck, the school day was assembling itself. Students moving across the lot. Bells and voices, and the ordinary percussion of a morning that had no idea it was happening adjacent to anything important. "I was the one who told my dad about your mom's ashes," Raylan said. "In the glove compartment. I saw them one night when I was checking on your car." "I know," Cole said. "Are you angry?" "No. I am glad someone saw them." She reached across the cab and took his right hand. Her fingers were cold. They were always cold. But her grip was not tentative. It was the grip of someone who had made a decision and was expressing that decision in the only language she had fully trusted since she was 10 years old, which was the language of showing up and holding on without making it conditional. "My dad wants us at Sunday dinner," she said. 5 o'clock. He is making ribs. He has something he needs to say to me. Something big. Do you want me there?" She squeezed his hand. "Yes," she said. Sunday came with the smell of mesquite smoke and charring meat, and the long shadows that desert evenings throw across driveways lined with motorcycles. The compound on Ridgeback Road looked different in the evening light, softer. The machines in the driveway casting shadows that stretched toward the house rather than away from it. The dining room table was long and heavy built from reclaimed barnwood that Harlan had found in Nevada and spent 3 months finishing by hand. It seated 12 and every seat was full. Willa Stratton was there with a casserole dish, having adopted the Voss household the same way she had adopted Cole, with a quiet, decisive generosity that did not announce itself or ask permission. She had been the waitress at the all-night diner across from the police station, the one who had refilled Cole's coffee on the desperate nights without asking questions. And when the news broke, she had driven to the hospital and then to the compound and had simply made herself part of what was happening next. Two older members of the Iron Saints who had been on the honor ride sat with their hands folded and their eyes carrying the private weight of men who had lived long enough to recognize a moment that mattered. Raylan sat beside Cole. Harlan sat at the head. Before anyone touched their food, Harlan stood. The room went quiet the way rooms went quiet when Harlan stood, not from fear, from attention. The attention of people who had learned that when this man had something to say, it was worth hearing. He did not look around the table first. He looked at Raylin, only at Raylin. "What I am about to say I should have said 7 years ago," he began. His voice was different tonight, stripped of everything that was not essential. Just a man standing in his dining room with 7 years of a specific failure in his chest and the decision to finally set it down. "Every day I did not say it was a day I failed you." Raylan went very still. Cole felt her hand under the table, her fingers finding his without looking, the grip tightening. "Your mother did not leave because of the club," Harlan said. "She did not leave because she was weak. She did not leave because she did not love you. She left because I chose the title over the man every single time she asked me to choose differently, and eventually she ran out of times to ask. That was my failure. Not hers, not yours." Willa had set down her fork. The two older bikers were looking at the table with their jaws set and their eyes doing the private work of men who recognized something in what was being said because they had lived adjacent to it themselves. "I spent 7 years letting you carry a note in your pocket like a wound you were afraid to examine." Harlan continued, "letting you believe you were not enough to make her stay. And that is the worst thing I have ever done in a life that has not been short on things I regret. Because I watched my daughter grow up thinking she was unlovable, and I had the words to change it, and I kept them to myself because saying them would have meant saying I was wrong." His voice broke on the last word, a single fissure in the stone of him, small but running all the way down. "You are enough, Raylan." His voice was barely above a whisper now. "You were always enough. Your mother loved you. I love you. And the boy sitting next to you right now did not run across that parking lot for the Iron Saint's daughter. He ran for the girl who puts shampoo in strangers' lockers. The girl who sees people that everyone else has learned not to see. He ran for you, just you." Raylan was crying. She was not hiding it, not managing it, not doing the things she had spent 7 years practicing, which was the conversion of difficult feelings into the kind of silence that looked like composure. She let it happen in front of 12 people at a table in her father's house, with the smell of ribs in the air and the November dark outside the windows. Cole put his arm around her, his right arm, the working one. She leaned into him, the leather of her jacket against the cotton of his shirt, the armor against the ordinary. And for the first time in 7 years by his count, the girl who had needed the armor let someone hold her while she was not wearing it. Harlan looked at Cole. "Will you say grace?" he asked. Cole had never said grace at a table this full, or this quiet, or this weighted with expectation. He had said things to a cardboard box in a car in parking lots at 2 in the morning, and he supposed that was its own kind of grace. He tried. "Thank you for this food and for this family," he said, "for second chances and for people who show up when they do not have to, for being seen when you have been invisible, for homes that are not just buildings, but people who choose you, and for the courage to say the things we should have said a long time ago. Amen, Harlan said. Amen, the table said. Glasses were raised. Food was served. Ribs and roasted potatoes and cornbread and Willa's casserole, which turned out to be mac and cheese executed at a level that sparked a genuine argument between two Iron Saints veterans about the specific ingredient that made it different from all other mac and cheese. The argument was loud and affectionate and entirely unresolved, and Willa watched it with the expression of a woman who had planned this outcome. Laughter filled the room. Stories were told. Harlan sat at the head of the table and watched his daughter laugh for the first time in weeks, and the expression on his face was the expression of a man who had set down something very heavy and was still getting used to what it felt like to stand without it. After dinner, Cole and Raylan walked outside. The November sky was enormous, stars from horizon to horizon. The kind of sky you only got this far from the city lights, the kind that reminded you that the sky was always this full, and it was the lights of civilization that had been hiding it. Orion was up. Cole looked for it automatically. I named the cat after a constellation, he said. Not that one. Atlas. But the first night we met, I was looking at the sky. I know, Raylan said. I saw you one night in the parking lot, sitting on the hood of your car with your head tilted back. You looked so small against it, like the universe was enormous, and you were just this one point in the middle of all of it. What made you decide to help me? She was quiet for a moment. You looked lonely, she said. Not just alone. The kind of lonely where you have stopped expecting anyone to come. I recognized it. I have been wearing that look for 7 years. You are not wearing it now, Cole said. Raylan looked at him. The starlight found the tattoo on her neck and turned the wings silver, each feather catching the light individually, the image of a thing mid-flight between one place and another. Neither are you, she said. They stood in the driveway of the compound on Ridgeback Road, with the motorcycles casting their long shadows and the voices of people who had chosen to be family drifting through the lit windows of the house behind them. And Cole thought about the distance between who he had been 8 months ago and who he was right now. A boy sleeping in a Honda Civic with 3 shirts and a rotation schedule and a stray cat and his mother's ashes in a glove compartment. A boy wearing a leather vest in a driveway surrounded by motorcycles with the key in his pocket to a door that was his. The distance was not a straight line. It was not a journey with a clear beginning and a clear end. It was 8 months of small decisions, and each decision had only led to the next one, and none of them had felt like progress at the time. The McDonald's bathroom. The 911 call with shaking hands. The moment the car door opened and his feet hit the pavement and he ran toward the danger rather than away from it. The granola bars left in a locker by someone who could not bring herself to say the words out loud. He went back to the apartment that night and made one final visit to the Civic. It was parked in the guest spot under the building. He sat in the driver's seat one last time, felt the groove where his body had pressed night after night, the specific contours of a space that had learned his shape. He ran his hand over the worn upholstery and opened the glove compartment. The cardboard box was there. He lifted it out with both hands and held it against his chest the way you hold something irreplaceable. The weight of it almost nothing and entirely everything. I got a place now, Mom, he said. I got a bed and a kitchen and a door that locks from the inside. I got a man who calls me son and means it every time he says it. I got a girl who saw me before anyone else did. I think you would like her. She is fierce, like you were. He held the box for a while. Then Atlas appeared from behind the dumpster, the torn ear and the dragging left leg, and the expression of a cat who has decided that patience is a reasonable strategy for getting what you want. Cole got out of the car and opened a can of tuna he had brought from his kitchen. His kitchen. He set it on the pavement and watched the cat eat. "I am not forgetting about you," he said. "I know what it is like to need someone to show up. That does not stop being true." Atlas wound around his legs and purred. Cole looked up at the window of apartment 2B. The light was on. He had left it on because he could, because it was his electricity and his apartment and his light to leave burning. His phone buzzed. A text from a number he had not heard from in months. Marcus, his brother in Colorado, the one who had left to save himself and had been silent through all of it until Cole's face appeared on every screen in the country. Saw everything Marcus had written, the shooting, the bikers, the apartment. "Little bro, I am so proud of you. Mom would be too. I am sorry I was not there." Cole read the message 3 times. He could hear Marcus in the rhythm of it, the particular way he put sentences together, the same Marcus who used to make cereal before school and check under the bed for what lived in the dark. He typed back, "I have a home now." 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, "You always deserved one. Can I visit? I am never leaving again." 6 words, more than the 3 his mother had left, enough to start. Cole typed, "Come whenever you want. There is a couch with your name on it." He walked back upstairs, set his mother's ashes on the shelf in the bedroom next to the community college acceptance letter and the Reaper's Customs business card and a Polaroid photograph that Raylan had taken on the porch of Harlan's house that afternoon. The two of them caught mid-laugh in the Sunday light, his arm around her shoulders, her face open in a way that it was not usually open, the armor absent, the girl beneath it present and visible. He lay down in his bed. The comforter was thick and warm and smelled of laundry detergent and the clean nothing of fabric softener. The most ordinary smell in the world, the most extraordinary thing he had experienced in 8 months. His phone buzzed one final time. Raylan. A text because apparently some things were still easier typed than spoken. "Good night, brother." Cole looked at the word. Not the brotherhood of leather and chrome and 300 people on their knees in a hospital parking lot, though that was real too, and he would carry it his whole life. Something smaller and older and more specific. The brotherhood of 2 people who had been through the same dark without knowing the other was there and had found each other on the other side of it and had decided without ceremony to stay. He set the phone on the nightstand. He closed his eyes. The nightmares would still come. Dr. Wynne had told him so. The hallway and the gun, and Garrett's eye through the gap in the door, and the sound of the door pressing against his spine. These things would visit him in the dark for months, maybe years. Healing was not a line moving in one direction. It was a spiral circling back through the same pain from a slightly greater distance each time. But when he woke in the dark, he would not be in a car. He would be in a bed, in a room, in a building full of the small sounds that buildings make when people are living in them. And the nightmare would still be real, and the fear would still be real, and the work of carrying what had happened would still be real. But the morning would also be real. The refrigerator humming in the kitchen. The light he could leave on because it was his. The key on the nightstand. The photograph on the shelf. Willa's coffee at the diner on the house forever, she had said, and meant it. Atlas waiting by the dumpster with his torn ear and his patient faith that someone would arrive with tuna. Marcus on a highway from Colorado, Harlan's handwriting on the refrigerator. Non-negotiable. Dad. Raylan's cold fingers finding his hand under a table before either of them had decided to do it. Cole Merritt was not invisible. 300 people on their knees in a parking lot had made sure of that. A girl with wings tattooed on her neck and a note folded in her inside pocket had made sure of that. A man who had spent a lifetime being the most dangerous presence in any room he entered, and who had gotten down on one knee in front of a hospital in the gray November morning, had made sure of that. In a world that had taken his mother and his home and his childhood and very nearly his life, Cole Merritt had found the one thing that no accumulation of loss can fully destroy. He had found family. Not the kind you were born into, the kind that sees you when you have made yourself invisible, the kind that leaves shampoo in your locker because it cannot figure out how to say the words, the kind that kneels for you in a parking lot and means every inch of the gesture, the kind that sits across from you in a truck and takes your hand and makes the choice that is the opposite of three sentences on a kitchen counter, the kind that shows up. Cole fell asleep thinking about tomorrow, about the bike shop and the Tuesday therapy appointment that was non-negotiable, and the Sunday dinner that would happen again next week and the week after that. About Marcus's voice on a phone for the first time in months and the couch with his name on it. About Atlas waiting by the dumpster with the patience of something that had learned that the person who fed you would come back. About Raylan's laugh at the dinner table unguarded and real, the laugh of someone who had remembered how. For the first time in 8 months, Cole Merritt dreamed not of surviving. He dreamed of living.